Manny Diaz has a couple bills. He's next. Representative, since you do have two bills, you get to pick which one you want to do first. You can do CS for House Bill 775 or CS for House Bill 1175.
Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Chair. I would love to start with CS for House Bill 775.
We will go in order. So first we have your presentation. We do have an amendment by Representative Avila, so if you can please present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill deals with the issue of recalls and the relationship between the auto manufacturers and the auto dealers here in Florida in reference to those recalls and how they are dealt with. And that is the bill, Mr. Chair.
My understanding is that the amendment filed by Representative Avila is a strike all on behalf of Representative Diaz, so he will be deferring to you if you can present the strike all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Avila, for filing this fine amendment. So, Mr. Chair, this strike all reflects the compromise between the parties, and it changes the percentage of compensation provided by manufacturers and dealers from 2% to 1.5. It also clarifies the law that includes recalls prior to July 1, 2017. It clarifies that a written notice from the manufacturer to a dealer indicating that the car may be sold regardless of the recall is based solely on the specific recall notice and not other vehicle conditions. And it changes the effective date of the bill to July 1, 2017. That's the strike all, and again, that is a result of a lot of compromise and negotiation.
Do we have any questions on the strike all? Representative Geller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Rep. Diaz, Chair Diaz. I just want to follow up on that last issue. The reduction from the 2% a month to a 1.5% a month rate has basically been agreed to by the different sides in this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this strike all is a result of negotiations between the two sides.
Any further questions? Representative Beshears.
Thank you, Chairman. I know you've been working on this a long time. I appreciate all you've done. I'm just curious about that 1.5%, where that is in relation to the rest of the states.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are states that are currently working towards 1.75, and there are states that have gone at 1%. I think there's some differences when it comes to scope and language, so it's not necessarily apples to apples. So it's a difficult comparison to make.
Any further questions? Representative Hager.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this good bill. Does this bill address the issue of the time frame between when a recall is declared by a manufacturer and when the manufacturer must, in fact, have its dealerships prepared to install, address, remedy the recall? And here's the reason for that question. I got a recall probably a year ago, and it's a dangerous phenomena. And I called the dealership within the last month, and they said, well, we still have not been authorized, have not received the parts, etc. So that's my question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the genesis of the bill is to address the problem of the fact that we have vehicles in Florida sitting with recalls and that parts may not be available. Probably the most prominent part of it would be airbags that you probably heard of. But yes, this is the answer to try to attempt to address that same concern.
Follow up?
Yes, sir. Follow up on the strike all.
So does the bill itself superimpose a time frame in which the manufacturer must have delivered the remedied product to the dealerships?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what it does is create compensation if the product is not delivered within the time frame allotted in the bill.
Any further questions on the strike all? Do we have any testimony, public testimony? Representative Moskowitz has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does this strike all hold with the fundamental premise that when there is a recall, it is the manufacturer that should bear the cost of the recall and not the dealer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say yes to that, but I would say to you that this is dealing with used vehicles, just to be clear.
Any further questions on the strike call? Seeing none, we do have a card on the amendment, Richard Reeves. Waves in support. We are now on debate. Does anybody have any debate on the strike call? Seeing none, you are recognized to close. Oh, Brian Avila, I guess, is recognized to close, and he waives his time to you,
We've closed.
and he waives his time. Anybody have any opposition? Seeing none, without opposition, let's show that amendment adopted. We're back on the bill as amended. Do we have any questions on the bills amended? Show the amendment adopted, and we are back on the bill as amended. Yeah, we have questions on the bill. Representative Moskowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I understand that it deals with used cars, but the car could still be under warranty and still be used and still be sold back to the dealer. So do you believe at that point that it holds with the fundamental premise that if a used car still within warranty is sold back to the dealer, that it is the manufacturer that should bear the cost of the recall?
Representative
Thank you,
Diaz.
sir. I would say yes.
Any further questions on the bill as amended? Seeing none, we do have testimony. Ron Book, Auto Nation.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, on behalf of Auto Nation and a large number of dealers around the state, this issue deals specifically, Mr. Chair, through you to respond to both Representative Hager and Representative Moskowitz's questions. This deals with not 1 million cars that have been recalled in America, not 10 million, not 20 million, not 30 million, not 40 million, not 60 million, but 65 million plus open recalls in America today, largest percentage of which deal with safety issues that affect people, Mr. Chairman, like the recall Representative Hager is referring to. The fact of the matter is, this is a response to a need to put pressure on manufacturers to provide the fix to dealers. Ms. Representative Moskowitz's question about cost to the manufacturer versus the dealer, the fact of the matter is that if we don't deal with this issue and we don't put the pressure on manufacturers to provide timely parts for dealers to repair vehicles, the consumer is the one that gets hurt. It's not a question of who bears the cost of the repair itself, because the manufacturer remains on the hook for the cost of the repair and reimbursement to the dealer. But if thousands upon thousands upon thousands of cars in Florida remain sitting on dealers' lots at their expense, let's just be clear. When you go to trade your car, when you go to buy your new car, if you think the consumer isn't going to pay for that, you are just simply mistaken. We thank the sponsor of the bill for working with us. We thank the sponsor of the bill for working on behalf of the consumers of Florida. Ladies and gentlemen, 24 to 26% of all sales tax collected in the state of Florida comes out of the auto industry. People sometimes wonder why it is dealers and manufacturers are always before the legislature arguing and fighting. To some extent, it is because of the uneven relationship that exists between manufacturers and dealers. And I remind you that dealers live in Florida, work in Florida, hire Floridians, pay taxes, and make a difference on the lives of Floridians. And they're the ones that provide you and your constituents with vehicles and provide the repairs. It is unfortunate that it was necessary to come here on this. The feds dealt with the issue of new cars. They didn't deal with the issue of pre-owned and used cars. That's why we're here today. So thank you.
Thank you. We do have a question, Representative Geller.
So you and your clients support the bill?
We do.
Thank you.
Brewster Beavis.
Chairman, members of the committee, Brewster Beavers with Associated Industries of Florida. Always love following Mr. Book. We are in a respectful opposition to this piece of legislation. We do appreciate the movement that we have seen on the percentage rate. The 1.5% is still, we believe, a little bit high as we look at out across the rest of the country. We have Arizona at 1.5%, Oregon at 1.5%, and then North Carolina just recently introduced a bill at 1.75%, which we believe will move back to the middle. But the difference is what we're seeing here with the Florida bill is the scope. These other states are only for, I believe, stop sale and non-drive. What this bill does is it adds that percentage to vehicles that can be sold, that can be moved off the lot immediately after these dealers collect the 1.5%. So we do believe that is a bit excessive, and we would like to see that scope whittled down to your stop sale or non-drive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Thank you. Representative Moskowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand you're in opposition to the bill. Do you disagree with what the representative said, that the fundamental premise is that when a manufacturer sells a vehicle and that vehicle has to be recalled specifically, potentially for a major safety issue, that the manufacturer should not bear the cost of that recall?
I believe if there is a major safety recall, that the manufacturer should bear some responsibility for that. And also, I do believe that the manufacturer of that part that could be deficient should also bear some responsibility for that as well.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Moskowitz.
So then would you agree then that the dealer should have no responsibility in repairing or paying for a product that was given to them that was defected?
Mr. Chair, I'll have to go back to our members. I haven't really talked to them about that specific piece. I do believe that that if you have a manufactured vehicle that is sitting on a lot that can be sold, I find an issue with, a dealer collecting a 1.5% on that, and the next day that car can be sold. It is safe to drive and leaves the lot.
Thank you. Representative Berman. Oh, was it Hager? Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to AIF for your testimony here. Certainly, from a public policy standpoint, I want to see if you agree with me on this. AIF certainly supports expeditious movement and availability of parts to address the defect. Is that? I guess it's a yes or no question. Thank you.
Yes.
Chair, I believe that we do.
Thank you.
Representative Geller.
I just wanted to follow on the question that Rep. Moskowitz was asking you. Understanding that you also believe that the manufacturer of the defective part should bear some responsibility. Being that the manufacturer of the vehicle is the one who picked that vendor, who do you think should be responsible for pursuing and collecting from the manufacturer of a defective part?
Mr. Chair, I would have to go back to our members and discuss that. That's not an issue that I've had a conversation with any of our members on.
Thank you. We have Gary Hunter.
Thank you, Chairman, members. Gary Hunter on behalf of the Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers. Just to be clear, Chair Diaz is correct. Chair Manny Diaz is correct that we have negotiated over this bill for several weeks and months, really, since he filed the bill. We are not in agreement. I represent the Alliance, which is 75% of the cars that are sold, manufactured. Some manufactured. Alliance members are outside of the U.S. as well, but 75% of the cars that are driven and sold in the U.S. are manufactured by my association's members. This bill is an aberration to what has proceeded in 9 other jurisdictions with agreement from the dealers in 9 other jurisdictions. Mr. Beavis just referenced the main distinction in this bill. The 1.5% is a little high, frankly. Of the 9 states where there have been worked out agreements, 7 of those states have been at 1% reimbursement rate. 2 of those states have been at 1.5% reimbursement rate. North Carolina has been initially filed at 1.75% rate. As Mr. Beavis indicated, we believe that will come down. The dealers filed that bill at 1.75%. This bill started at 2.43%. And so Representative Diaz has reduced that rate to the 1.5. The primary distinction is the scope issue. The language in every other state agreed to by the dealers has been you have to have a stop sale order from the manufacturers or issued by the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration saying, do not sell, do not drive that car, and then the percentage is owed after 30 days pass and there's not a part to fix the car. This bill says something very different. And so you create a standard in Florida that said, and remember, cars are manufactured and sold all over the U.S. They're not a Florida car. There's not a Georgia car. There's not an Oregon car. There's a car manufactured in Detroit, dispersed throughout the U.S., sold or manufactured somewhere outside of Detroit and sold. Wherever it's sold, it may end up in Florida, but the dealers and manufacturers don't control that. The consumers control where that car ends up. And this sets a standard and a precedent in Florida, frankly, that's dangerous for Florida. So we would suggest that's a bad idea. The bill has gotten better. If that were fixed, I don't think we'd be up here arguing against it. But creating a standard unique to Florida is not good for Florida. It doesn't reflect well on the business climate in Florida, and we'd ask you not to support the bill too. So Representative Moskowitz's question, just to be clear, manufacturers always pay to repair the recalls. Always. It's always a manufacturer obligation. We agree with you. We should, if there's a defect in a car, we should pay to fix it. This bill addresses those circumstances when there isn't a part available, and so a car has to sit and wait until that part is available. Sometimes it doesn't have to sit and wait. The car can be sold. That's the point of distinction here. But when it has to sit and wait, then this is what this bill's dealing with. But the manufacturer 100% of the time is paying for that. And remember, the dealers are the ones benefiting from that scenario too. The dealers are getting paid full retail rates by my members to fix that car. So they get the part whenever it becomes available from the manufacturer. They fix it. They send a bill to the manufacturer, not at a discounted rate, at full retail prices to get the repair paid for by the manufacturer. So there's a profit opportunity in it, and we're not critical of that. It's just a fact that the dealers are getting paid on the back end to fix the car, and when this bill passes, they're getting paid for the passage of time while it sits on their lot, even if they could sell the car the way this bill is written, 1.5% per month for it to sit on their property. Secondly, lastly, this bill allows the dealers to go buy a car at wholesale for which they know there's a recall, the way this bill is drafted, for which they know there's a pending recall. They could go to the wholesale market, purchase a car, knowingly purchase that car at a discounted rate because they know there's a pending recall on it, take it to their lot, let it sit there, collect 1.5% per month until the part becomes available. And we suggest that's not an equitable way to deal with these parties. So in sum, we have negotiated over this bill. Chair Diaz, Manny Diaz is correct. We haven't negotiated very well because it's not in a place where we're comfortable with it, but we do appreciate his efforts and willingness to talk to us getting to this point. We would ask you to oppose the bill.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Representative Moskowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I understand that you bear the cost of the repair, but obviously, and let's just take the situation where tens of millions of airbags have been bad in cars, and those parts might not be readily available for tens of millions of cars at the same time. So you have these cars sitting on lots because the vendor that the dealer chose put a defective product in the car, and we don't have enough airbags to get them in cars quick enough. So those cars are sitting. They're costing money while they sit on the lot. The insurance on the lot. They're potentially losing value as they sit longer. You don't think the manufacturer should bear those costs?
Chairman. Absolutely we do. We agree with the premise of the bill in that circumstance that we should pay a percentage to the dealers for that car sitting there. And in that scenario, remember, I'm glad you raised that point because this whole bill started over a Takata airbag issue. We're now applying this bill to any recall, and we heard Mr. Book get up and talk about the gazillion theatrical number of recalls that he alluded to. I'm sure since, Henry Ford created vehicles back in the early 1900s, his numbers probably accurate. The fact is, in those circumstances, you would have a stop sell order, and we agree there ought to be a payment. We may not agree it should be 1.5%. We would prefer 1, but we're okay, frankly, with the 1.5% if the language of what it applied to were correct. This bill doesn't have the language that every other state and every other dealer association in every other state has agreed to. Thank you for your question.
We have Hager, and I'm hearing Edwards and Burgess. So Hager?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation on behalf of the manufacturers. Here, just to follow on with the theme of this bill, your manufacturers have in play in this state hundreds of thousands of vehicles in which the manufacturers have said to the owners, you're driving a car that has a defect because of our negligence, and that defect can kill you. However, we can't figure out how to get the parts to the dealers so as to facilitate the repair. How can you be in front of us and justify that demeanor?
Representative Hager, in all due respect, I don't think this bill deals with that issue. Your question relates to a consumer-owned vehicle. This bill is dealing with a vehicle sitting on a dealer's lot. And so I don't know the facts, specific facts of which you reference. I mean, here's the deal. If there's a vehicle that has a safety defect that is something that is to the point you shouldn't drive the car, and the manufacturer is aware of that, my suspicion, I'm not the one issuing those notices, they're telling you not to drive that car, and or they're telling you to take it to your dealer and let the dealer fix it. Now, if there isn't a part, then that's a problem. I agree with you. But, I mean, you can imagine the liability that would follow in a tort sense if you allow someone to continue to drive that car. So, again, that's not what this bill is dealing with, in all due respect. I'm happy to talk to you. Have manufacturer reps come down and talk to you if you like on your question.
Representative Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quick, you claim that laws are different in different states, but do those states address new or used cars?
All of these bills, Representative Burgess, deal with used cars. So the new car issue is dealt with by federal law universally across all 50 states. So in all the states that I'm talking about, the comparison is all dealing with the exact subject of Representative Diaz's bill, the bill we're talking about, the used cars.
Representative Stark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the bill were to be amended by the time we get to the floor to be 1 or 1.25%, would that change your opinion on this, or is it more information that's in the bill?
Good question, Representative Stark. The answer is it really isn't the percentage. We prefer 1%, but the 1.5 we're willing to accept. Representative Diaz understands that. It's the stop sale versus okay to sell language that is in the bill today, which is inconsistent with what other jurisdictions have done. The goal was to create, at least as to that aspect of this issue, to create a national approach as to how the manufacturers, wherever they happen to be, issue a letter or a position saying, don't sell the car, don't drive the car, in which case we would owe the percentage, whatever that percentage is. So it isn't the percentage as much as it is the distinction between the scope language.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hunter. We do have Ted Smith. Mr. Smith, please be quick because we do have a pretty hefty agenda ahead of us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be Ted Smith, Florida Automobile Dealers Association. I represent about 850 of the franchise new car dealers that reside in all of your districts. This legislation is not like some past issues where manufacturers and dealers have come before you. I would call this not really a manufacturer-dealer bill, but a consumer manufacturer bill. This is all about having the manufacturers take responsibility for these recalls and have the proper number of recalls covered by this legislation. You've heard about scope. Our concern on scope is if we were to have stop sales as the measuring device for what recalls to cover or not cover, I believe no manufacturer would ever issue another stop sale. And if they didn't do a stop sale, then there would be no compensation, which means the consumer would still be left hanging. That's my major point to the committee, Mr. Chairman. I'll answer questions if necessary.
Do we have any questions, Mr. Smith? Seeing none, thank you. We are now in debate, members. We're in debate on the bill as amended. Representative Moskowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be extremely brief. I've read the bill several times. I've listened to the testimony. It's rare that you see a bill that you don't sometimes say, okay, look, the opposition has a little point. This is the first bill I think I've ever seen come in front of me that literally there is no reason not to vote for this bill. I mean, the opposition's argument is completely ridiculous, which is that they want to fight the fact that they have put a defective product that might kill you in a car, and that car has to sit on the lot, and they want to fight over pennies with the dealers over the car that they manufactured with the vendor that they picked for those parts. Members, I ask for you to vote for this bill. It is a consumer bill. There are millions of people, including hundreds of thousands of Floridians, that deal with this every day. Sometimes people who can't afford when their car is sitting on a lot, waiting for things to be fixed. We need this to be expeditious, and I think Representative Diaz, you've done an excellent job trying to bridge the gap between the two sides, but I hope to see a unanimous vote on this one.
Any further debate? Representative Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to take a moment to thank Chair Diaz for all his hard work on this. I know that it's been a big work in progress. He's been working with all the stakeholders on this, and spent a lot of time on getting it to a healthy place where it is now. It's a great consumer bill, always has been, and it's really going to assist in both the dealers and with the consumers, because we better believe that the costs are eventually passed on to them, and that increases the MSRP of the vehicles. So thank you very much, Chair Diaz, for bringing this forward.
Any further debate? Seeing none, you recognize to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would say, having that bipartisan close already done for me, I will waive the rest of my time.
Having waived support, waived is closed. Michelle, please call the roll.
Representatives Osley, Avila, Berman, Bashirs, Boyd, Burgess, Duran, Eagle, Edwards, Eisnagel, Geller, Goodson, Grant, Reuters, Hayer, Ingolia, Jenny, Killebrew, Arosa, McGee, Miller, Moskowitz, Payne, Peters, Roth, Shaw, Stark, Toledo. Chair Diaz.
Yes, members, by your vote, the bill passes. We are now